black boy said, "I know how to cure your son." The doctor laughed until a miracle happened. The walls of St. Matthew's Children's Hospital were lined with cartoon murals and pastel colors, but nothing could disguise the ache that lived inside those rooms. Room 308 was no different, except for the silence. A silence that only existed where hope had nearly run out. Dr. Allen Prescott stood at the edge of the hospital bed, shoulders slumped, eyes red behind his glasses. He was one of the best pediatric oncologists in the country. But this was the case that had defeated him. In the bed lay Leo, his own 8-year-old son, pale, bald, too weak to lift his head. Acute myeloid leukemia. Chemotherapy had failed. Experimental drugs had failed. Prayers had been whispered in every language by strangers and friends. But Leo was slipping. Allen looked at the monitor's slow rhythm, at his son's fragile chest rising and falling like a paper-thin wave, and he wept. A quiet knock tapped at the open door. He turned, expecting a nurse, but it wasn't. A young black boy, no older than 10, stood there, jeans too short, shirt a little worn. He had deep brown eyes that looked older than they should have been. His name tag from the volunteer badge read, Malik. Allen wiped his face quickly, composing himself. "Can I help you, kid?" Malik stepped in, glancing at Leo, then back to the doctor. "I came to see your son," he said softly. Allen raised a brow. "He's not taking visitors, thank you, but I know how to help him." The words were so bold, so certain. Allen actually chuckled in disbelief. "You know how to cure cancer," he said, voice tinged with frustration. "That's rich." Mick didn't smile. "Number. But I know what he needs." Allen stood, his expression hardening. "Listen, I appreciate your kindness, but I've spent the last 2 years trying everything. I've traveled to Germany, talked to specialists in Japan. You think walking in here with a hopeful look is going to fix this?" "I don't have hope," Malik replied. "I have something real." Allen sighed and turned away. "Please leave." But Malik didn't move. Instead, he walked toward the bed slowly like he had done this before. Allen stepped in. "What are you?" "He's scared," Malik said, cutting him off, looking directly at Leo. "Not just of dying, he's scared of you seeing him like this." Allen froze. Malik gently took Leo's frail hand in his. "I was sick too," he whispered. "Worse than him. I didn't talk for a year. No one knew what was wrong with me. They thought it was brain damage, but it wasn't. I just saw something I couldn't explain." Allen folded his arms. "What did you see?" Malik looked up. Light and something behind it. It spoke to me, not with words, with feeling. It said I had to come back, that I wasn't done, that I had to help him. Allen stared, stunned. "You think this is a game?" he snapped. "You think walking in here and feeding him nonsense is going to change anything?" Malik didn't flinch. He closed his eyes and whispered something inaudible. Leo stirred. For the first time in days, Leo's hand moved. Allen blinked. "Leo!" Malik whispered again, this time touching Leo's forehead. Suddenly, the boy's eyes opened slightly, weak but open. "Daddy!" Leo croaked. Allen rushed forward. "Lo, can you hear me?" Leo nodded faintly. Allen looked to Malik, shaken. "What? What did you do?" "I reminded him why he's still needed here," Malik replied. "But he has to want it too." Allen swallowed. "This doesn't make sense. You're not a doctor. You're a volunteer, a child." "I'm more than that," Malik said softly. "Ask Nurse Delaney. She knows my story." Before Allen could respond, Malik turned and walked out of the room. When Alan asked the nurses who let him in, one looked confused. "No one," she said. "Malik hasn't volunteered here in months. He moved out of state last year. Beat a rare neurological disorder. Doctors called it a miracle." Alan stood in the hallway stunned. In room 308, Leo was sitting up asking for juice. The next morning, room 308 was filled with quiet wonder. Leo was awake, not fully recovered, not miraculously cured overnight, but alert, talking, and for the first time in months, smiling. His cheeks had a hint of color. He asked for crackers. He laughed at a nurse's silly joke. He even reached out and held his father's hand like he used to when he was little and afraid of thunderstorms. Dr. Alan Prescott didn't know what to do with himself. He'd spent the entire night reviewing charts, test results, medication logs. Nothing had changed. No new drugs, no last-ditch procedures. But Leo had improved on his own. Well, not quite on his own. Alan couldn't get the boy out of his head. Malik, the 10-year-old who had appeared in his son's room, said something no one could hear, touched his forehead, and changed everything. A boy who, according to the volunteer records, hadn't been at St. Matthew's in over a year. Alan sat down with Nurse Delaney, his voice low, his heart pounding. "Tell me about Malik." She looked up slowly, her expression unreadable. "Why?" she asked. "Because he was in Leo's room yesterday. He said he knew how to help him. I thought he was just another kid with a good heart. But now I don't know what to believe." Nurse Delaney hesitated, then set down her clipboard. "Malik came here when he was 4, she said. "No diagnosis, couldn't walk, couldn't speak. He was in a coma for 7 months. We called him our sleeping angel." Alan leaned in. "They said it was neurological, some rare viral inflammation. We tried everything. Nothing worked. Then one night during a lightning storm, he just woke up." Alan blinked. Just like that. She nodded, sat up, and said one word. "Light." That's all. Just light. But after that, he got better, like his body had remembered how to heal. The therapist called it spontaneous remission. The neurologist couldn't explain it, but his mother, she believed something bigger had happened. Alan's mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" She said when he was unconscious, she sat beside him every day, prayed, spoke to him. One day she said she felt something in the room with him, warm, loving, like someone had walked in from another world. The next morning, who woke up? Alan stared at the floor. She said Malik was changed after that. Delaney continued more sensitive, like he could feel things other people couldn't. A year later, he asked her to bring him to hospitals to kids who were sick. He'd just sit with them, hold their hand, sometimes say a word, and strange things started happening. Alan whispered they got better. Some did, some didn't. But the ones who did said the same thing, that he reminded them they weren't alone. Alan sat back in his chair, overwhelmed. "And where is he now?" he asked. Delaney looked away. They moved quietly. The mom didn't want attention. "Last I heard, they went somewhere in the mountains," said Malik. "Needed quiet." That night, Alan sat beside Leo's bed, holding his son's hand as he drifted to sleep. "Do you remember the boy who came yesterday?" he asked. Leo nodded. "He told me something," Leo said softly before he left. "What was it?" "He said, 'Your dad's going to be okay now.'" Alan blinked. "I thought you were the one who needed healing." Leo smiled faintly. "Number it was you." Alan couldn't speak because in that moment he realized he had been broken too. not just by his son's illness, but by the years of carrying the burden alone of being a man of science who couldn't save the one he loved most. He had forgotten what it meant to believe in something bigger than himself. 3 weeks later, Leo was discharged. The scans weren't perfect. The cancer was still present but stable, something doctors rarely saw in cases like his. His appetite returned. He began to draw again. He asked to go outside to feel the wind on his face. And Alan, he changed too. He stopped seeing miracles as fairy tales. He began sitting longer with his patients, listening more than talking, holding hands instead of holding charts. He even started a foundation in Leo's name, focused on holistic healing, emotional therapy, and the role of presence in recovery. They called it the Malik Project. One summer, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a photo. Malik, now older, stood on a hillside holding a small lamb. His smile hadn't changed. Taped to the back of the photo was a note. Healing doesn't always mean curing. Sometimes it just means remembering why you're still alive. M. Allen framed it and placed it in his office right beside a photo of Leo holding a stethoscope. Today, Leo is in remission. And Dr. Alan Prescott, once the skeptic, tells his patients about the boy who reminded him that medicine may treat the body, but love, connection, and belief, they awaken the soul.